This is the story of Patrick Deera, a man whose life seemed ordinary on the surface, but whose tragic end left an entire community stunned. Patrick was 23 years old, young, energetic, and filled with the kind of ambitions that most people carry at the start of adulthood. He was known among friends and family as reliable, approachable, and good-natured, the type of person others could lean on. He was not perfect, but he had goals and responsibilities that shaped the way he lived his life. Patrick grew up in a close family where he was especially bonded with his parents. His father and mother described him as hardworking and determined, a son who wanted to build a future for himself and contribute something meaningful. He had been raised with traditional values of respect and responsibility, and those values carried into his adult life. People in his neighborhood often remembered him for his politeness and his willingness to help. Whether it was running a small errand for someone or offering advice to a friend, Patrick was dependable in ways that set him apart from many young men his age. At 23, he was already balancing multiple parts of life. He had friends, hobbies, and a clear direction for his future. More importantly, he had a strong relationship with his parents, particularly his mother, who often worried about his safety, but trusted him enough to give him independence. Like most young men, Patrick enjoyed his freedom, but he was careful and aware of his surroundings. He wasn't reckless, and he didn't seek trouble. His focus was on moving forward with life, taking things step by step, and proving to his family that their faith in him was not misplaced. Those who knew him well often spoke about his easygoing personality. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he wasn't withdrawn either. He had a balanced way about him, someone who could joke around but also be serious when needed. His friends valued him, his family loved him, and his community respected him. That kind of reputation isn't built overnight. It's shaped by consistent actions and the impression someone leaves on others over time. For Patrick, this impression was overwhelmingly positive. But behind every ordinary life, there are moments of challenge. Patrick was no exception. He lived in an area where opportunities could be limited, and like many young men, he carried the weight of responsibility for shaping his own future. Still, he handled those pressures with resilience. He had a strong sense of identity, and his parents, especially his mother, often reminded him to stay grounded and cautious in his choices. September 17, 2009, was supposed to be just another day for Patrick. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where people wrapped up their routines and settled into familiar patterns. For Patrick, nothing about that day suggested that it would be different from the others before it. He left home like he always did, with the intention of returning safely. His mother, as usual, gave him her blessings, reminding him to take care of himself. It was a ritual that spoke of her protective nature and his acknowledgement of her constant care. But the calm rhythm of that day would soon be broken. What began as an ordinary evening gradually unfolded into the most shocking chapter of Patrick's life, a chapter that would end with devastating consequences. He had no way of knowing that he was walking directly into danger, and his family could never have imagined that their lives were about to be torn apart in ways they could not reverse. September 17, 2009 started like any other day for Patrick Deera, but as the hours moved into evening, everything began to change. Patrick was out that night, carrying himself as he usually did, but for reasons still unclear, he never made it back home. His family grew worried when he didn't return, because Patrick was not the type to simply vanish without a word. His mother especially felt the unease immediately. She knew her son's habits, and the silence was deeply unsettling. By the next day, fear began to replace the initial confusion. Calls went unanswered, and there were no signs of Patrick. The family reported him missing, and soon, local police were involved. For parents, there are few things worse than not knowing where their child is, and for Patrick's mother and father, every hour without answers felt unbearable. The turning point came when police received information that Patrick's body had been discovered. The location was shocking. He was found in an abandoned house, a place that had been empty for some time. The building was neglected, quiet, and hidden from plain sight, making it the kind of place no one expected to become the scene of such a tragedy. For investigators, the condition of the site immediately raised questions. Why was Patrick there? Who had lured him or forced him inside? And what exactly had happened in those final hours of his life? The discovery of his body devastated his family. His mother's grief was beyond words. She had feared the worst. But the confirmation of his death broke her in ways no parent can truly recover from. Neighbors, friends, and community members came together, shocked by the loss. Patrick wasn't someone involved in violence or criminal activity. For a young man with such a promising future to end up in such a tragic situation was both puzzling and deeply heartbreaking. Investigators carefully examined the scene. The abandoned house showed signs of disturbance, but there were no immediate clues pointing to who had carried out the crime. No clear weapon was left behind, and there were no eyewitnesses. The location itself complicated matters. Abandoned houses often attract different kinds of activity, and it was difficult at first to determine whether this was random or targeted. But one fact became clear early on. Patrick had not ended up there by accident. The crime was intentional, and whoever was responsible had gone to great lengths to hide their actions. Police began retracing Patrick's last known movements, interviewing friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have seen him that night. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The timeline placed Patrick alive and moving freely earlier in the evening, but by the late hours, his trail went cold. That gap became the central focus of the investigation. Detectives needed to know who he was with, what conversations he had, and whether anyone close to him might have held a motive. Meanwhile, the community waited anxiously. The loss of a young man like Patrick sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, fueling both fear and anger. Parents warned their children to be careful, and people wondered if the killer was still among them, hiding in plain sight. The pressure on investigators grew heavier with each passing day. As the investigation deepened, attention slowly began to shift toward individuals connected to Patrick's personal life. Friends were questioned, but the name that surfaced repeatedly was linked to his marriage. Patrick had married young, and his wife, instead of offering support and cooperation, began to draw suspicion. Her behavior didn't align with what investigators expected from a grieving spouse. When questioned, her answers were inconsistent, and her attitude toward the entire situation felt distant. Detectives sensed that she knew more than she was willing to admit. But suspicion wasn't enough. They needed evidence, and that evidence had to come from careful, patient work. Behind the scenes, Patrick's family pushed for answers. His mother, devastated but determined, pleaded with authorities to get justice for her son. She wanted the truth to be uncovered, no matter how painful it might be. This was no longer just about solving a crime. It was about uncovering betrayal, exposing lies, and bringing closure to a family whose entire world had been shattered in a single night. As the days turned into weeks, investigators pored over every detail of Patrick Deera's death. The abandoned house had given them little to work with, but the human side of the investigation, conversations, interviews, and patterns of behavior began to reveal far more than the crime scene itself. At the center of suspicion was Patrick's wife, whose actions and words simply did not match the weight of the tragedy. In most cases, spouses of victims are devastated, cooperative, and eager to help in any way possible. Yet Patrick's wife seemed distant, guarded, and even irritated at times when asked to recall details. Detectives noticed this difference immediately. She avoided eye contact during questioning and often changed her statements when pressed. These inconsistencies were not overlooked, and it soon became clear that she was hiding something. Further investigation uncovered a troubling truth. Patrick's wife had been involved in an extramarital relationship. The marriage, which had once looked stable to outsiders, was unraveling behind closed doors. Neighbors and acquaintances later confirmed that there had been tension between the couple, though few had realized just how serious it had become. When police began to explore this angle, they found evidence that connected her to the man she was secretly seeing. Phone records, text messages, and witness accounts revealed a relationship that had been ongoing, one that she wanted to keep hidden from Patrick and his family. For detectives, the motive was beginning to take shape, but motive alone wasn't enough. They needed proof that this affair had directly led to Patrick's death. As they dug deeper, what they uncovered was chilling. Investigators found evidence suggesting that Patrick's wife and her lover had conspired together. The theory was simple but devastating. Patrick had become an obstacle, and the two wanted him out of the way permanently. Whether it was out of anger, frustration, or a desire for freedom, the result was the same, a calculated plan that ended in murder. This revelation shook Patrick's family to the core. To lose him was already unbearable, but to learn that his own wife, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had built a life with, could have been involved was a betrayal beyond comprehension. His mother, who had adored her son and supported his marriage, felt doubly wounded. The idea that someone welcomed into their family circle could be capable of orchestrating his death was almost too much to process. Detectives, however, could not let emotion interfere with procedure. They continued collecting evidence meticulously, piecing together timelines, gathering forensic data, and interviewing witnesses who might have seen or heard anything suspicious around the abandoned house. Step by step, the case grew stronger. Eventually, both Patrick's wife and her lover were brought in for questioning again, this time with far more evidence on the table. Under pressure, cracks began to show. Their stories no longer aligned, and when confronted with hard proof, the reality of their actions became harder to deny. The case went to trial, drawing widespread attention. The courtroom was packed with Patrick's family, friends, and community members who wanted justice. Prosecutors presented a clear narrative. A young man betrayed by the person closest to him, deceived and ultimately murdered as part of a selfish plan. The evidence spoke loudly, and the testimonies of investigators painted a vivid picture of the conspiracy. Patrick's family sat through the proceedings, listening in anguish as the details of the crime were laid bare. His mother, in particular, carried herself with courage, though every word was another cut to the heart. The community rallied around her, offering support and prayers, but nothing could erase the pain of what she had lost. In the end, the truth prevailed. The court found Patrick's wife and her lover guilty, confirming what investigators had suspected from the start. Justice, though delayed, was finally delivered. Sentences were handed down, ensuring that both would pay the price for the life they had stolen. For Patrick's parents, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but not relief. Their son was gone, and no court ruling could change that reality. Still, knowing that the people responsible were held accountable gave them strength to move forward. His mother often spoke about Patrick afterward, remembering him not for the tragedy but for the young man he truly was, kind, responsible, and loved by many. The case of Patrick Deera became more than just a local story. It served as a sobering reminder of how betrayal and hidden motives can destroy lives. It showed the importance of persistence in investigations and the resilience of families who demand justice for their loved ones. Patrick's life may have ended far too soon, but his story continues to echo through the memories of those who knew him. He is remembered not for the cruel act that ended his days, but for the goodness he brought to those around him. And in the end, the truth ensured that his voice was not silenced without consequence. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many more shocking stories ahead of you.